Hi there, welcome back to Dadsplaining Politics.
Hi, everyone. After a few weeks hiatus, we are back with renewed energy.
We are because we had a bit of a discussion about it, how the media is an interesting place at the moment, and we wanted to make sure we were presenting the best podcast versions of ourselves that we could present. So we had a few discussions about how we want to continue the podcast and if we're going to be including our personal perspective as much. And we've decided to do more of a journalistic type style podcast where we don't express our personal opinions as much, and it's a lot more relaying information to you guys so you guys can get the most out of it, and we can also get everything that we want to get out of it. So at the beginning of every episode, we're going to be doing a disclaimer saying whatever we say in the episode, if it's a personal opinion, that's just a personal one. Don't take it too seriously. There's different lenses you can look at every conflict, every world event, every piece of news and foreign affairs, anything we cover. There's always a different perspective to take. So we are open to all those perspectives and get excited to be back with us. Welcome back.
It's great. So today we are going to focus on the topic du jour, which is the Iran war, together with the Farah by-election. Those of you may not be up to date. Susan Ley, who was the former head of the Liberal Party, that was her seat. So as a result of her ouster as the head of the Liberal Party in Australia, there is a by-election coming up in Farah. So we'll discuss that.
Yeah, definitely. We'll discuss that. And then, of course, we had the Iran war, which is going to be the focus. And that's what we'll start with. So I guess we'll get into the Iran war then. So obviously there's been a very complicated history when it comes to Iran and its nuclear program for an incredibly long time, for about 40 or 50 years, basically since the current Iranian Republic has existed. So we've had a government in place in Iran that has wanted a nuclear weapons program for a long time. There have been a lot of international agreements and efforts to restrict this program because, as well as the threat that it poses to the Middle East region itself, and specifically to Israel as being an enemy of Iran in the region, it also poses a threat to the nuclear safety of the entire world. And, if you guys know, the doomsday clock brings us a couple steps closer when you have such an unpredictable power in charge of such a weapon of mass destruction. It can be very dangerous.
If I just take us back historically, and been for most of my life that the Iranian Revolution happened in 1979 when I was 15. Prior to that, the Shah of Iran and his predecessors ran the country like royalty, if you will. And the Islamic Revolution got rid of the Shah and all that leadership on the basis of corruption, etc., and went back to a fully Islamic society where the clerics ran things in a sense. And that's what's happened right up until this day. The challenge with that is they've really impoverished the Iranian people, and those clerics have become incredibly wealthy, unfortunately, based on all the corruption, etc., and the misogyny, etc., of that regime. Quite a terrible regime with millions of people killed and disappeared, etc., over that period of time. It's been such a long time that there's many Iranians who live in exile in places like Australia and the US and UK, etc., who would dearly love the country that they remember to be back, a more freedom-loving country where people had more of a democratic sense of life. So the current war we're in is clearly the Iranians are totally against the state of existence of Israel, and have funded much terrorism around the world, various terrorist groups, to not only be attacking Israel, but the West, etc., in addition to what Freddie says, trying to produce a nuclear weapon. So all of that's kind of the background of this. And, 6 months ago or so now, Israel and the US used bunker busting bombs to...
I think it was June.
Was it
last year. So
also more than that?
yeah, just over 6
To try and destroy the nuclear facilities of Iran, and that was some time ago. And there's been discussion of negotiations, etc. And then we got to the position where Israel and the US attacked Iran just over a week ago.
Yeah, yeah. So that is the current state of things, and all of this has been following on from the efforts that were made by the Obama administration. So before Trump came into power, this is also a very crucial activity of trying to use diplomacy to solve this conflict rather than straight out military efforts as Trump is using. But back in the day, when we had someone very different in charge of the White House, just I think 2015, just before Trump got in, there was this joint comprehensive plan of action that was agreed to by Iran and also by the US, and the agreement detailed that there would be a lot more monitoring and awareness of the Iranian nuclear program, because for a long time they've been enriching uranium. And obviously, you have to be careful with that because it could be used as just an energy source, but it could also be used for weapons itself, right? So people have been skeptical for a long time. It agreed to that. Iran agreed to descaling some of their enrichment programs, and the US agreed to lift a few sanctions in exchange. So that was a peaceful, fairly successful project for the year or so that it was working. There was increased transparency with Iran and all of its efforts, and the US was happy. Everyone was as happy as you can be when you're dealing with such an unpredictable power, because the alternative to coming up with a plan like that is where we are now, a full-out war with the Middle East, which is something no one wants, regardless of the fact that maybe the blasts have killed the Ayatollah. It has in no way destroyed the Iranian military efforts yet. And if anything, it's given them a lot more, a lot of desire to fully see this conflict out to the end. And they're in an existential place right now, Iran, where what do they have to lose? Because if the US is going to, try and destroy them with everything they've got and completely obliterate the leadership, then Iran probably feels like they have no choice but to do their best on the military side of things as well.
The real question is, it's a great point, Freddie. The real question is, the US and Israel really want regime change in Iran now. And so the challenge is, are the Iranian people ready for that fight and ready to overturn the Islamic Guard, etc.? It's just been announced that the new supreme leader, the son of the Ayatollah Khomeini, Mojtaba Khomeini, has been named as the supreme leader of Iran. And now he's a hardliner like his father. And so, neither the US or Israel are going to be happy with that. And hopefully the Iranian people aren't happy with that. But, given the internet blackout from Iran, you don't really hear what's happening with the Iranian people. Are they rising up? Are they doing anything? There was discussion about helping the Kurds and arming the Kurds to make an invasion into Iran. But I think Trump was saying the other day they don't want that complexity at this point in time to the whole thing. So hopefully the Iranian people can rise up. There's talk that the Shah's son, the prince who lives in the US, has been communicating a lot with expat Iranians and Iranians in Iran in order to rise up. And, as Trump said, this is their opportunity, maybe the best opportunity they've had in a number of years. But the question is, can a regime that's been in place for so long, not just a few people, the whole structure of society, can it be overturned? That's the big question.
It is a big question. And look, you can view regime change as this easy Goldilocks type solution to any form of, really destructive regime. But the fact of the matter is, it's one thing to kill the leader and oust the rest of the leadership. It's another thing to find a good replacement who's going to be capable of transforming an entire society into what does the US even want from this? Do they want a democratic society? Do they want a puppet leader, someone they can put in to act as a representative of the US in that region? Because a lot of people aren't going to be happy with that either. So the solution to this crisis is incredibly unclear and has not been explained by the US or Israel at all to this point in time. They're very focused on destroying the regime and regime change, but they've never really discussed what that means. So it'd be interesting to see if it gets any further what their plans are and what they lay out
I
for
don't
the people.
I don't think they have. My sense is they don't have detailed plans
Yeah.
on that whole thing. I think there is a little bit of a gap. I think the US would be happy with someone, a leader who's more compliant, who's not funding terrorism, who actually takes advantage of the economic benefits of reduction in tariffs, etc., and blockages, trade blockages that the US has put in place.
Mm.
But the Iranian people may not be happy with that. I have a sense the Iranian people have had the most terrible time over the last 50 years or so, and maybe they're ready for a fundamental change. That's what all the protests were about. So it's fascinating, but you don't really hear, it's not like anyone's representing the Iranian people outside the regime
Mm.
at the moment. It's fascinating.
It's definitely fascinating. And I think that this is what I've been thinking about a lot. I think that I grew up with this myth of every individual can stand up for something and has the power to do something in the world. I think we've really gotten to the point when it comes to great power politics that we're realizing that's not the case. It doesn't matter that hundreds of thousands of people in Iran want regime change. If there is a government that is powerful enough and has a strong enough military force, like the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, what can they do? Against such a violent entity which has so much control over them. And when you're dealing with the US as well and Israel, both incredibly powerful, um, great powers, it's a difficult position to be in. I also think it's interesting, right? Because Trump can say this is the best opportunity they've had in a long time. There was massive revolts and protests undertaken in Iran not too long ago, but they've already happened, and the Iranian government came down hard on those protesters. There are estimations that they did kill thousands and thousands of people. Anyone who dared to lift a finger, anyone who dared to go to a single protest or say a single thing against the regime, they were killed. So it feels like that feeling of protest and that feeling of, rebellion, surely they would have quashed that at least a little bit by the use of such violence.
They might have, but I would not be as pessimistic as you are in this regard because I believe any of these things get to a tipping point.
But don't you think the tipping point then happened when all of this rebellion was happening?
Not really, because they weren't supported from outside. They weren't
But this
supported
was
from
during the
outside.
time when Trump launched those
I
attacks
know, but
on
that really didn't do anything for the
nuclear
leadership.
enrichment
This has decapitated the
facilities.
top 40 leaders of the Iranian Guard, etc. I mean, and, destroyed a lot of their military capabilities. So this is very significant. I mean, they're reeling from this. They're being smart because they're attacking Dubai and Kuwait and other parts, even Saudi parts of the Middle East, to sort of disrupt and saying, no ships will move through the Straits of Hormuz. So disrupting the worldwide oil price and disrupting a worldwide air travel because of Dubai and Doha, etc. And that's really shocked the world, particularly people living in Dubai and all those places like Doha and Dubai, because you've just assumed these are incredibly wealthy, comfortable places to live, even though they've always been situated in this powder keg, which is the Middle East. But they've always been utterly stable, and that's what they've banked in from terms of tourism and living, etc. So, of course, the UAE and others are very concerned about this because this could damage their brands dramatically.
Definitely. And I think I'll just have to say, from my personal opinion, when it comes to all of this, you kind of express the view that a lot of people feel that Iran has caused this. I don't think that Iran has caused this. I think that the US and Israel have teamed up to stop what they believe is an imminent existential threat. But, even in the case that Iran got a nuclear weapon, what do we see them doing with that? if they targeted Israel, there would be all-out nuclear war from Israel and from the US. So I think that we all make this out to be an incredibly imminent threat. All of the nuclear watchdogs have said that Iran does not have active working nuclear missiles. So, and Tulsi Gabbard even said that they don't have active nuclear missiles and they're not close to that. But Trump overrode all of this and decided to, pursue military action despite all of it. So some say Israel even pressured him into this. So I think that it's Israel and the US that have disrupted supply chains and disrupted air travel, maritime travel, disrupted the oil price, I would say. Because would there be missiles flying across the Strait of Hormuz without the US and Israel first sending missiles in there? No. And I'm not saying that it's their fault, this conflict at all. I'm saying this particular conflict that has happened over these past few weeks is currently happening because of the actions of the US and Israel. That's my opinion.
Yes, in response to the
In response.
behavior of Iran. I mean,
Yeah,
would you like the Iranian people to have a new opportunity? Or
of
you
course. I just don't think that saying that the US is doing something that could be causing war, I don't think that that's saying that I don't care about the Iranian people. I think that's quite a dramatic response to take when I'm saying it's very difficult in this situation to approach such a powder keg with such violent tactics. We live in a very, distressing world at the moment. There's a lot of conflict going on. To simply enter a place where there is so much nuance, a country where there's so much nuance, a region, and start firing missiles is incredibly dangerous. Like even from the behalf of US, it's incredibly dangerous because do they want Iran to be flat out attacking them with everything they have? No, they don't. But what else is Iran going to do? Because in their position right now, they think they're going to be all out eliminated. They don't want that to happen. So how can they avoid that? I'm obviously not on the Iranian side. I'm obviously on the side of everyone else. I'm on the side of the people. I'm just looking at it from an analytic perspective. I'm looking at it from above and seeing, is this going to affect real change that's going to help the people?
it's a very fair
Or is
question.
it going to endanger them as we've seen it endanger them over the past few weeks?
It's a very fair question. We live in a world where strength is power. Okay, we don't have an international rules-based order, as Mark Carney so eloquently put it recently. So people don't go to the UN for a resolution to, you know, um, get rid of the nuclear threat from Iran. Those days are gone. The US has power, as it showed in Venezuela, and it's showing in Iran. And that's the world we live in, right? Whether it's good or bad, that's the scenario. So that's why many countries like Canada and Australia supported the action to get rid of the nuclear threat of Iran. And they chose their words carefully, but they supported this unilateral action or duolateral action, maybe it is, between Israel and the US for Iran. So it's going to be fascinating. And I don't think Iran has quite the military power that some people assume, because most of it's been destroyed.
Yeah, look, I agree, and I hope that that's the case. I really do. I just think that I feel for the actual people of Iran, who there's a lot of great power activity happening right now, and we can't forget the fact that over 3,000 people have died in the
Mhm.
past few weeks because of this war, and that includes over 160 girls in an elementary school between the ages of 7 and 12 years old. They were killed when the US sent a missile to there was an IRGC, which is the Revolutionary Guard headquarters beside the school, and it missed the headquarters and attacked the school. So I think that we've gotten very used to innocent people dying in the face of what the US wants. And I think that we need to reevaluate whether it's going to have real change. I hope it does. Obviously, I want it to have real change. Iran is a problem and it is a very dangerous position for everyone to be in, but I see innocents dying and I think that that makes me quite upset and it makes me worried about the state of this conflict.
That's true. And the other interesting thing about this, some of these wars like Ukraine and Russia have been going on and not affecting people's day-to-day lives, right? So people can sort of ignore it in a way, in a terrible way, not so
You
much
mean like people like us in
people
the West that
outside of
got
Ukraine, not
yeah.
immediately in the area. Whereas when the oil price spikes, and it has to a record high, when international air travel's disrupted, suddenly it brings it home to people. All those expats living in Dubai, they might be thinking, goodness, do I really want to make this my home for the next 10 years? Making people reassess their lives. So the global repercussions of this, and that's part of the Iranian strategy to attack their neighbors in the Gulf to extend the impact of this.
I mean, I agree, and I think that it is just the impact of a regional, and some could even say international war, what some are calling World War III. That is the impact. It will disrupt people's lives, and I think that it has been very naive of us and very disconnected to believe that these wars won't affect us. Because even if, the Ukraine-Russia war hasn't been directly affecting our everyday lives, it's been dismantling the global order
Mhm.
as we see it behind the scenes. And I think this is a very real ramification of that we're now seeing play out in the Middle East.
So what's your prediction, 4 weeks on? Where will we be with Iran?
Um, my my feeling from a policy perspective from the US, I think that there's a lot going on in the US right now that Trump wants to distract from. I am one of those people who personally believe that some of this is to do with the Epstein files, and it's to do with distracting from his own domestic issues. Because even aside from the Epstein files, there has been a lot of there's been a lot of negative feelings about everything happening with ICE and everything happening with immigration, and then, of course, everything happening with Epstein. So I think that it's a very convenient time to be engaging in an international dispute rather than a domestic one because it brings your attention elsewhere. So I think that Trump is going to continue launching this with everything he has. I think that he feels invincible, so he feels like he can do anything to Iran and there's not going to be ramifications for himself. But yeah, there have been 7 US military personnel already dead. I wonder how the American citizens will respond to this. But I think the US is going to continue attacking. I think Iran is going to do the same. Maybe they will try and find terms for a ceasefire at some point because I don't know how sustainable these efforts are at the moment.
Okay, I think it will continue. I agree with you on that. I think they'll try and take out Mujtaba, the new supreme leader,
Yeah,
because he's unacceptable to Israel and the US. I think they must be doing stuff behind the scenes with the CIA in order to get the Iranian people to rise up. So yes,
hopefully.
I
You'd
think
hope.
it's going to be going on for some time, and maybe some selected special forces inserted into Iran to assist the bombing campaign. So yeah, I think it's going to be with us for some time, and hopefully you get to some sort of a result um, which is satisfactory to the rest of the world.
Definitely. And one thing I'll add as well is I think that there would probably be growing interest on Hezbollah in Lebanon at the moment, right? Because as one of Iran's 2 terrorist groups that they supply, there's a few more actually, but they supply Hamas and they supply Hezbollah. Obviously, Hamas has been incredibly damaged in recent years, so Hezbollah is probably their strongest terrorist group.
Also incredibly damaged in recent years.
Yeah, that's also been incredibly damaged, but maybe they have a part to play in all this. Maybe the US will try and target them a bit more as to weaken the Iranian regime further.
Hmm.
I'm not sure, but it's all going to be a mix of all of that
Hmm.
happening. But with that said, should we move on to Australia?
Yes. Let's move on to the Farrer by-election. So Farrer is in southern New South Wales, the town of Albury and other towns in that space, agricultural region. Water is one of the big issues. The Murray-Darling scheme takes a lot of water from Farrer, and there's been lots of concern from farmers of not having enough water, or it's costing too much, etc., etc. Susan Lee was the member for um, Farrer. Now, she held the seat for 25 years, the leader of the Liberal Party. She took over the seat from Tim Fischer, who was the head of the Nationals Party, so it was a national seat prior to her. And so it's always been a coalition seat. forever, right, since it was formed. Now, as a result of Susan Lee being deposed, she has said she's retiring from politics, and thus a by-election needs to be held. It'll be held in May of this year. And so it's going to be fascinating because, the coalition is really on the nose with voters. The Labor Party is not contesting the seat. So there'll be a Liberal candidate, not yet named. There will be a Nationals candidate, has been named. His name is Brad Robertson, a former Army general. One Nation will contest the seat, and David Fairley, a guy, has been named. And he's a farmer, an irrigation and agribusiness businessman. Quite an eloquent guy, I think, actually, for a One Nation candidate. And he even spoke eloquently about, this is an area where there's lots of migration, immigrants who help pick the crops and do stuff with businesses. And he was treading the line between Pauline's super anti-immigration thing and the right kind of immigrants. They need people to help pick the fruit, etc. So that was interesting there. And then the final candidate is Michelle Middlethorpe, who is the independent, who did very well against Susan Lee. She came in number 2 last time. Think of her as like a rural teal independent, not as passionate about climate change, but more the issues affecting the local farmers, i.e. these water issues.
Yep.
So she did really well last time. And the big question is, so this will be a test for Angus Taylor's leadership, the new leader of the Liberal Party, but it's all going to come down to preferences, Freddie, this whole thing,
Yeah, definitely.
and who gives preferences to whom.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very interesting, all of this, because this seat has been held, I think, by the coalition since almost its inception for an incredibly long time. And Susan Lee has even held this seat since 2001. So the fact that this seat is now up for redistribution to another candidate is a massive thing already. I think that I just want to add in as well about the climate perspective. I've actually seen an element of this debate that climate is quite key to it because of all the droughts and water issues
Sure.
facing the region. I think that some candidates have even been pointing to climate change for causing those problems. And they don't necessarily want aggressive climate policy, but they need policy to address the water
issues
issues
they're facing.
themselves. So they've been talking about that. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a test for the Liberals. Angus Taylor seems very enthusiastic about getting a Liberal candidate in there, but they haven't even chosen one yet. So I don't know how enthusiastic he can be.
I know, it's crazy. When you think about it, the other 3 contenders already have their candidates, including the Nationals and One Nation, and the Liberal Party hasn't even chosen a candidate. Now, will they choose a man or a woman?
I mean, I feel like they should choose a man, should they not?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like they need to choose a woman just from a overall national viewpoint.
Do they have any women left?
Yeah, well, this could be a new candidate, but it's just bizarre. So the question is preferences. So if the pundits are, the independent is the favourite at the moment, but if the Liberal and Nationals give preferences to One Nation could win the seat.
Yeah.
And vice versa. So clearly, the independent is not going to give preferences to One Nation. They would give preferences to Liberal and Nationals after them, and then One Nation at the bottom. So it's a fascinating thing. Will the Liberal Party give preferences to One Nation to allow One Nation, Liberal and National, to win?
Yeah. Look, I think that it's important to also note, because obviously preferences are very important, but I, as my political science student, I've actually done some research into preferences. And yes, they make up a big percentage of what the vote outcome is going to be. You can predict a few things based off that. But also, when it comes down to how many times have you checked the preference sheet before you've gone into vote, I think the average voter doesn't necessarily memorize the preference sheet on their way to the voting booth.
No, but they get those how to vote cards from the.
They do, but I think that it's meant to impact their decision less than the pundits generally think it's going to impact their
Hmm.
decision. So, from my point of view, I think I see One Nation being quite successful in this seat. I don't know about you.
I don't think they can be successful unless they get the preferences of the Nationals and the
Okay.
Liberals. Think about it. There's a new candidate. The advantage the Independent has, she's already been the candidate before and she came second to Susan Lee. All the others are new candidates.
Yes, but I would say that everything that Susan Lee was aligned on and all her policies are much more closely connected to the policies of every other candidate than a female independent.
Mm.
Yes, would they not be?
Mm.
And I think with the rise of One Nation in the polls, it's probably saying, I think this will be very telling to the future of Australian politics, what happens in this by-election
Oh,
year. It's going to
yes.
reflect how all of our parties are doing and the popularity of all of them. So whatever happens, it's going to mean big things. But I think the way it's going,
So
One
you think
Nation
One
is going
Nation could
to,
win outright?
I think they're going to be quite successful. I think that it's potential if the Liberals put in a good candidate that they could win or that the Nationals could win. But I think that One Nation is going to do at least better than people expect them to do, even if they don't
But
win
also
this.
it's splitting the vote. The Liberals and the Nationals running two candidates, again, I find rather bizarre, right? I mean, of course, they'll preference each other.
Yeah,
But again, it's rather bizarre, the whole thing to dissipate their funding
definitely.
and all of that. It just shows the dire nature of the coalition. So my prediction, One Nation will win with Liberal and National preferences. And that will be the end of the Liberal and National Party over coming years because this is a continual spiral. And if they give preferences to One Nation to allow One Nation to win, that'll be a greatest act of self-harm of the Liberal National Party that they've done.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't understand the problem because I thought the problem was that they had issue with Susan Lee and the policies that she was putting into place. So now that the Liberal Party has chosen Angus Taylor as the new Liberal leader, surely he would be open to forming the coalition anew. So I'm
What do you
confused.
mean? Like with One Nation?
No, like with the Nationals.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Yeah. As in, I thought that was the main concern is
I
that she was trying to push the Liberals in
I
a different
think
direction.
you're giving too much credit to the coalition. I don't think they know what their policies are. I think they're in a death spiral, and I think they're just trying to survive day to day.
Yeah.
I mean, I really think they're in a bad way, which is why all these people are deserting them, all the voters of Farah, because they've had enough.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to watch that space, and you're going to watch this space over the next few weeks as we dive into this and see what it's going to mean for Australian politics going into the future.
And Susan Lee must be looking at this with pleasure, her old seat. And
I mean, I think it would probably be quite like upsetting, right, to know that you've represented a seat on values that are not that far right. She's quite a moderate liberal, and so she's representing what she
how,
believes to be a moderate seat. So however this election goes, I don't think it's going to be a moderate seat anymore.
how about this for a power move, though? The Liberals and Nationals preference One Nation. Susan Lee comes out and says, as a result of that, I'm supporting the Independent.
Yeah,
Why not?
look, that would be great.
What an interesting move for Susan Lee as her final, say to Angus Taylor. I would do that if I was her.
I wonder what loyalty she still feels to the Liberal Party, though, after being part of it for such a long time.
Probably not. Probably, of course, loyalty. But if they give in to One Nation, maybe that will be enough to tip her over.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess we're just hoping for that. We're hoping for her to do something, what she would probably believe to be quite radical. Because why not end your political career on a high note? And why not end our podcast on a high note?
Yes, exactly. Anyway, it's lovely to be back. Hope you like the podcast. Share it and like it, and we'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Okay, bye. Thanks for joining us.